These are the sounds of the legendary Roland TR-909 drum machine. It has shaped the sound of many genres ranging from techno, house, hip-hop and pop to industrial and Eurodance. In this video, we'll take a look at 16 of our favorite 909 drum patterns, including its very first appearance as well as modern productions nearly 40 years later. So get ready for some interesting 909 history and trivia. We'll be using the Oxy One as a sequencer so you can see all the different instruments and you can try the patterns in your drum machine or in your DAW. Hello everyone, this is 1983 was a turbulent year for the drum machine world. Sample-based machines like the Lindrum and the Oberheim DMX were all the rage. The now legendary 808 was discontinued, and as its successor, Roland launched the TR-909. But it took a few months for an actual song with the 909 drum track to be released. And so in 1984, the Japanese drum machine made its debut in Canada of all places, on the Remission EP by the electro-industrial band Skinny Puppy. You've got to hand it to Skinny Puppy. Their drum patterns sound like nothing else out there. This is about as far away from the mainstream as it got in 1984. We love the 808, but you just have to admit that the 909 boasts so many great new features that it makes even some modern drum machines look bad in comparison. You've already heard one of these in the Skinny Puppy pattern, individual and global accents. On the 909 you can decide for each step individually if it should be accented or not. The 808 only gave you a global accent, which emphasized all instruments on a given step. That global or total accent still exists in the 909, but the important thing is that it adds up with the individual accents. This instantly gives you access to multiple dynamic levels, which can make your tracks so much more expressive. The 808 takes the undisputed first place as the drum machine associated with hip-hop. Mantronix has built a lot of fantastic electro and hip-hop grooves with that machine, so who's to say he can't do it with the 909 as well? He was one of the genre's early adopters who embraced Roland's new drum machine, which gave those tracks a very different sound. That was another great use of the total accent feature. Listen how the bounce immediately disappears as I dial the total accent down. And Mantronix Bassline showcases yet another two new features, shuffle and flam. Shuffle, or swing, allows you to delay the even steps on the sequencer, which gives the rhythm its groove and energy. Check out our video about swing and shuffle if you want to learn more about that. A flam is a double hit, like this. These double hits don't each have the same strength though. On the 909 they consist of a softer grace note, followed by the stronger main note. Flams are entered in a different mode, so they're a bit awkward to program because you can't see the regular steps. There are no individual accents for flams, but you can emphasize them with a global accent. The flam width lets you choose how far the double hits should be spaced apart, from narrow to wide. Sadly, flams aren't available on every instrument. You can only place them on the kick, snare, and toms. Considering how often Phil Collins has brought drum machines from the underground into mainstream pop productions, you could call him a drum machine ambassador. Unlike many drummers of the time, he wasn't afraid of drum machines taking his job. Instead, he used them as an integral part of his drum tracks, proving that acoustic and electronic drums can work together very well. In 1985, the inevitable happened. Due to its lack of initial commercial success, the 909 followed the footsteps of the other Roland drum machines, the 808 and 606, into an early grave. After only 3 years, it was discontinued. Why? Probably because by that time, the market was all hyped up on digital sample-based drum machines, and the analog instruments of the 909 just didn't fit the bill. Little did they know what was to come. Inner City's Kevin Saunderson is one of the Belleville Three. Along with Juan Atkins and Eric May, he was one of the originators of the Detroit techno sound, for which the 909 was a key ingredient. But it often wasn't the only ingredient of the drum track. While the 808 had a great set of Latin-flavored instruments like congas, clavers and maracas, it seems that with the 909, Roland wanted to focus more on the core sounds of a standard drum kit. So the 909 had to make some friends along the way. In this case, it's the TR-727, which delivers additional percussion. But let's take a look at the 909 part. Maybe you noticed that when the hand clap and snare play together on the 2 and 4, it sounds a bit odd. Let's listen to that in isolation. There's this weird hollow phasing sound whenever they're triggered at the same time, and that's because they both use the same noise generator circuit. A workaround is to route one of the two instruments out separately. The signal phase on the external outputs is inverted, which gets rid of the phasing. DJ Eddie Flesh in Vogue once said in an interview that he picked up his first 909 for $50 at a pawn shop. To say that this was a good investment is quite the understatement. Of the 10,000 TR-909s produced, even the grimiest, most beaten down ones are now offered at very high prices. So of course there's a market for 909 replicas out there. The Dinsync RE909 and the Steda SR909 are two I was particularly interested in. They were created as DIY projects, and you can also use them to repair old 909s, so they have the same workflow as the original. I've always wanted to try one, but I just didn't have the time for such a big soldering project. When we found out that the Belgian music shop TurnLab is building and selling these ready-to-use SR909s, we asked them if we could borrow one for this video, and they said yes. If you're also interested in a pre-assembled SR909, then check them out. You can find the link in the video description. 1989 saw the release of the Belgian techno anthem Pump Up the Jam. Back then, this genre was called hip house because it combined house music with rap. But that genre label was pretty short-lived, because I think we all know what 909 beats and rapping led to a few years later. Kicks, accents, 3 open hats in a row. Plus a closed hat on each beat. That makes the kicks extra clicky. The closed hats are especially important because they choke the open hats and thereby prevent them from spilling into the kick. Adjust the decay until everything feels right. And now for the cherry on top. We're going to give every step a total accent. Except the ones right after the kick. Sounds almost like sidechain compression, doesn't it? The open hats start to pump and dance and duck away from the kick. Look, I'm not saying this preempted the popular use of sidechain compression, but it is a pretty nifty trick. We'll also need hand claps on top of these. No phasing issues this time, because Pump Up the Jam dodges this problem by using a hand clap from a different machine, the TR-707. And that's where another killer feature of the 909 comes in. It actually was the first drum machine with a MIDI interface. That's something we take for granted nowadays, but MIDI was brand new back then. It's crazy to think that although the 909 is over 40 years old, it can still communicate with brand new gear from today. Here I'm using one of the 16 external tracks to trigger a sample of the 707 hand clap. An 808 open hat, and some 808 maracas. Madonna always had a knack for picking up on trends, and this time it really paid off. Vogue incorporated many elements of house music, and naturally, this included the TR-909 as well. The track became Madonna's biggest commercial success at the time and the best-selling single of the year 1990. But that's only half the story. While the 909 does the heavy lifting, there's an elaborate percussion arrangement surrounding it. Let's head over to the second sequencer. There are finger snaps where normally we'd have snares or hand claps. Then a 727 high conga. That's all we need for the intro. After that, some 707 hi-hats and a 707 tambourine. Last but not least, one of my favorite percussion sounds, the agogo. This is a samba instrument with two bells, one pitched high and one pitched low. Here we used the 727 agogo. Apparently, March 1990 was a pretty good month for the 909. Only 6 days after Madonna's Vogue, we got Adamski's Killer, which he wrote together with Seal. This actually was Seal's big break, and he later re-recorded the song for his debut album. Wasn't quite as successful though, probably because he didn't use the 909. Nothing to really write home about, but there's a lot more going on. And that comes from the Yamaha RX-120 drum machine, a budget sample-based preset rhythm box. It had no programmable sequencer, but you could control it externally via MIDI. And according to Adamski, that's what he did. In an interview he said that this was a happy accident. He simply sent the iconic bassline of the song via MIDI into the drum machine. But when I looked at the MIDI implementation chart, the notes didn't really seem to fit. We were tempted to buy an old RX-120 just to confirm this, but luckily Vintage Modern Audio on Instagram was kind enough to record the MIDI mapping for us, so we could more accurately replicate the drum machine's behavior. Our conclusion is that Adamski used the bassline only as a starting point. Either way, this mimicking of the bassline with percussion sounds adds a really interesting layer to the song. There are some tracks that keep popping up on various Best of 909 lists, although they were not necessarily made with the TR-909. Orbital's Halcyon and On and Aphex Twin's Heliosphan are two good examples for this. They feature only a few actual 909 sounds that most likely came from the Roland R8 drum machine, which had an expansion card with 909 samples. Some elements of the 909, like the hi-hats, are so recognizable that they seem to dominate the entire drum track. But I guess this is the time to be bold. We'll lean into it and make an all 909 version out of Heliosphan. During the early 90s, a new harder subgenre of techno started to emerge, hardcore techno. Its aggressive sound was first achieved by using cheap mixers with low headroom and overloading their input with the kick. The 909's kick drum was ideally suited for this treatment. The reason is that it has a more pronounced down chirp. It starts at a higher pitch and then quickly goes down. A pitch bend, or a frequency slide if you will. This makes it sound more aggressive and punchy than the smooth, round kick of the 808, for example. Thanks to its more complex frequency content, the 909 kick translates better to small speakers, but it also plays really well with distortion. And Trac-X by Circuit Breaker, aka Richie Hawtin, is a great example where distortion is applied not only to the kick, but to the entire drum track. Björk's Hunter features one of the most fascinating 909 patterns ever, which is why we already dedicated an entire Drum Patterns Explained episode to it. It turns out though that Björk might have misremembered when she said that Mark Bell programmed this on a 909. Most likely he used an Ovation drum station, a virtual analog 808 and 909 clone sequenced by the Latronic Neutron, which is lovingly called Darth Vader's toilet seat. So, just to confirm all my theorizing about whether it's possible to program Hunter's weird combo of pattern scales entirely on a 909, here are patterns 1 and 2 using only the internal sequencer. Daft Punk's Revolution 909 is a staple drum pattern on our channel, so naturally we had to include it in this video as well. I mean, it has 909 in the title, and it simply is one of the best demonstrations of the 909 shuffle feature. This club hit originated from Finland, and it got its second wind more than a decade later when it went viral, became a meme, and everyone's favorite troll answer to "What song is that?" Apart from the 909, this track also prominently features two sounds from a sample CD called Mega Bass Remix. This one from track 57 Bangs, which is layered on the kick drum in the intro, and this one from track 58 Whooshes, which is used during transitions. Okay, let's pause here for a second. That snare roll you just heard is only possible if you sequence the 909 via MIDI. The odd hits are always at the same level, but the even-numbered hits keep increasing in volume. By the beginning of the new millennium, standalone drum machines had fallen a bit out of fashion as production workflows became more and more sample-based. Luckily, this drum machine dark age didn't last very long, and soon our beloved beige box was back in business. The giver was Duke Dumont's breakout Deep House track back in 2015. But 3 years before, he released a more minimalistic version, which feels a bit closer to the heart of the 909. So that's the one we're looking at. This pattern actually has 3 tricks up its sleeve. The first one is what I'd like to call a ghost rim shot. To achieve this, we routed the rim shot out as a separate signal. Then we split it up. It goes back into the main mix, but also into a 100% wet reverb. If we mute the dry signal, then we're left with just the reverb. This creates a nice ghostly echo. Come to think of it, this might have been an 808 rim shot. Yep. I wonder what Dumont and Darude have against the 909 rim shot. The second trick is that there's swing on this pattern, but only on this single step. And the third trick is a 707 closed hat. It's thrown in there to make the hi-hat phrase a bit more interesting. You know what? I'm wondering if the hand clap might be from the 707 as well.
So, you're saying the rim shot isn't from the 909, the hand clap isn't from the 909, and there's this weird swing thing that could also be an edit?
Yeah, and the kick doesn't exactly sound like a 909 either. Uh-oh. Turns out that the 909 hi-hat phrase might have been sampled along with the vocals from a track called Time for Love by Kim English from 1995. You got me this time, Dumont. Still a great drum pattern, though. John Tejada's Predicting Machine was released the same year. It's an album filled to the brim with classic drum machine sounds. So this time we're pretty sure it's the 909 that's playing on stabilizer. It's a great drum pattern with just 16 steps, and the only thing I have to do is mute and unmute tracks and adjust the closed hat decay. What happens when you put the wizard Jeff Mills into a bright empty void with just a 909? Magic. I mean, seriously, this performance should leave no doubt that a drum machine can be played live just like any other instrument. I am, however, deeply worried about his knees. Done, and all in just one single take.
Sure, if you don't count the 45 before this one.
Our final pattern for this episode is I Go by Peggy Gou, a Korean DJ and producer. With this 2021 track, she pays homage to the 90s club music she listened to while growing up. Also, this might be the coolest album cover of our selection. In true 90s fashion, this track relies on a 909 and a few select sidekicks. We have the 707 tambourine, always a good choice, and on sequencer 2 we have the 727 low conga, which is downtuned by 3 to 4 semitones, and the 707 high tom. The most prominent effect here is a delay on the rim shot. It's a simple 16th note delay. Just make sure it repeats often enough. But the trick is that you only put the delay on the last rim shot in each bar. And remember, you can find the transcriptions of all drum patterns in this video and many more on our Patreon, along with cheat sheets for lots of drum machines and groove boxes, including the 909. And as always, a big shout out to all of our patrons. Thanks to you, we can keep making these videos. I mean, ask anyone to imitate techno and they'll give you this downchirp 909 kick and the 909 hats.